Hey guys, tonight we step into a smoky, black-streaked world where danger lingers in every shadow, and survival depends on how still you can keep your hands. You're walking through a medieval gunpowder factory, though factory is probably too generous a word. Think more remote timber shack perched by a river, surrounded by muddy paths, and always under the eye of a local lord who wants bigger booms and fewer questions. You probably won't survive this job, by the way, not without losing a couple toes or eyebrows. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You show up at dawn, sack slung over your shoulder, not quite sure what you've signed up for. All you know is someone in your village said gunpowder job pays decent, and only a few people exploded last season. Comforting. The road to the site is flanked by deep ruts and the unmistakable scent of sulfur, which smells like someone tried to bake rotten eggs inside an old boot. Charming. As you approach the factory grounds, you realize just how isolated this place is. That's deliberate. The last thing a medieval town wants is an accidental cannon-grade detonation near the baker's stall. Everything's built from timber clay and reinforced stone, but the wood's blackened, and one building has a jagged scar running through its roof. A reminder. You're greeted, if you can call it that, by a wiry old man with one eye and half a beard. New blood, he mutters. Keep your sleeves tight and your mouth shut. Another worker ambles past with a stump where a hand used to be. That's not just workplace folklore, it's the dress code here. No one tells you much. You're just pointed toward a storage hut and handed a scratchy apron soaked in grease. The work is divided into zones: saltpeter prep, charcoal processing, sulfur refining, and mixing. Though refining is medieval for let it sit in a pot and pray. All of it stinks. All of it's flammable. Historians still argue whether these gunpowder mills were more centralized government operations or local lord-run facilities. What's clear is that workers like you were expendable. If you blow up, there's a long line of peasants waiting to replace you. Fun. Your first duty: shoveling black powder scrapings off the floor and dumping them into labeled sacks. You're warned not to drag your boots static. Friction is a thing. You smile nervously, unsure what static even means. The veteran worker just points to a charred spot near the entrance. Last guy found out. During lunch, if you can call hard bread and onion water lunch, you sit outside on a barrel, hands stained, nostrils inflamed. You overhear talk of the big mix happening tomorrow. That's when the ingredients come together. That's when things get really exciting. The veterans fall quiet when you ask what that means. As the day wears on, you start to notice a certain rhythm to the factory. The occasional clang of iron, the constant whoosh of bellows from the charcoal hut, the eerie silence whenever someone opens a barrel of finished powder. Everyone holds their breath, literally. Here's a quirky fact for you. Some gunpowder makers use dried manure in their recipes, believing it added earthy properties to the blend. The science is dubious, the smell is not. It's very present. At sunset, you trudge to a straw mat tucked in the back of a storage barn. No one stays too close to the main hut at night. Rumors of spontaneous combustion haunt the place. You lie down, chest aching from the fumes, ears still buzzing from the rhythmic pounding of mortar pistons. Your dreams that night? Explosions, of course. But not fireballs, just the soft, sudden pop of something going wrong. Then silence. And soot. The next morning, before the sky has even turned gray, you're woken by the unmistakable aroma of ammonia and the very clear feeling that many things, in fact, have urinated nearby. That's not your imagination. Today, you're assigned to saltpeter duty. Saltpeter, also known as potassium nitrate, is one of the key ingredients in gunpowder. Medieval chemists called it Chinese snow, which sounds far too romantic for what you're about to endure. Harvesting it is less chemistry and more scooping bodily waste off walls. Your guide for the day: a grim-faced woman named Edra, who wields a hooked shovel like a knight's lance. The process starts with the stable walls, damp-stained and teeming with white crust. "See that glint," Edra says. "That's the good stuff." You resist the urge to gag as you scrape what looks like dandruff and smells like chamber pots into a wide, cracked bucket. Saltpeter forms from urine-soaked earth and decaying organic matter. So yes, this is alchemy by way of filth. The refining process is equally glamorous. You carry your stinking loot to a long wooden trough where it's mixed with ash and water, then filtered through layers of straw and cloth. The resulting liquid is boiled until it crystallizes. It's like cooking, if cooking were performed by someone who hated food, and also science. You slip once on a patch of something you don't want to know what, and land hard, your hand sinking into a slush of compost and chalky residue. No one helps you up. Everyone's busy, trying not to inhale. Welcome to the lowest rung of the gunpowder ladder. Here's a mainstream fact in medieval Europe. Saltpeter was so valuable that some kingdoms regulated it like gold. Monarchs sent agents into rural villages ordering peasants to turn over their outhouses and stables to the crown. So if you're wondering how closely your employer resembles organized crime, it's pretty close. You glance at the guards stationed near the compound's edges. Yes, guards. Their job: to prevent workers from stealing saltpeter, or worse, selling it to the wrong people. Edra whispers that 2 workers disappeared last year after trying to smuggle out a few sacks. The official story is wolves. The unofficial story involves shallow graves and lords who don't tolerate side hustles. Historians still argue whether saltpeter mining was mainly a state-controlled operation or driven by black market guilds. There's also ongoing debate about how efficiently it was refined without modern chemistry. Spoiler, not very. Around midday, your eyes start to sting. The fumes from the boiling pans form a thick haze that lingers low to the ground. You watch as another worker faints mid-stir, collapsing into a barrel. No one panics. He's dragged outside, doused with water, and left to air out. 5 minutes later, he's back at it with red eyes and a limp. Industrial safety isn't exactly trending in the 14th century. A fringe tidbit: some factories used human urine by name, specifically that of ale drinkers, thinking it produced stronger saltpeter. There are actual collection orders on record where officials requested beer-heavy pee. You wonder what that job interview was like. Your arms are jelly by the end of the day, and you reek so thoroughly that even the rats give you space. The sack of finished crystals you carry back feels light but deadly. One loose spark, and you wouldn't even have time to scream. As you dump the bag near the mixing hut, a veteran claps you on the back and says, "If you last charcoal duty, you might just live to see winter." He laughs. You try to, but the sulfur in your lungs turns it into a wheeze. You fall asleep that night, curled in a ball, one eye twitching, and your hands still tingling from chemical burns. You think about quitting, but you also think about the coins they promised you, and the fact that you've already survived longer than the guy with the limp. Today, it's charcoal duty, and the others look at you with a blend of pity and morbid curiosity, like someone heading to a duel with a spoon. Charcoal is the 3rd vital ingredient in medieval gunpowder, and in theory it sounds the least terrifying. After all, it's just burnt wood, right? Wrong. You're herded with a few other unlucky souls into the forest outskirts, where a great mound of dirt and logs rises like a buried dragon. This is the charcoal clamp, a carefully arranged pile of split alder wood stacked tightly in a dome covered with sod and earth, and then get this set on fire. Slowly, for days. Your job: maintain a delicate, choking, vision-blurring smolder without ever letting it burst into flame. You become a human thermostat with a shovel. Too hot, and the wood combusts. Too cold, and it turns to mold. Somewhere in between, you get black gold. As you shovel a fresh patch of earth onto a suspiciously glowing spot, smoke erupts in your face, curling into your nostrils like some sentient ghost with a grudge. Your eyes stream. Your lungs feel like a blacksmith's bellows. One guy vomits. Another calmly uses a dead squirrel as a potholder. And yes, There's a fringe tradition in some villages rubbing charcoal dust into the skin to toughen the blood. Whether it worked is debatable. What isn't debated is how everyone looks like soot-covered goblins by noon. Here's the mainstream fact: medieval gunpowder recipes typically used charcoal made from alder willow or grapevine wood. The type of wood, the burn rate, and even the tree's age affected the final explosive power. Monks and alchemists kept recipes as closely guarded secrets, like Grandma's deadly stew. As you squat beside a low vent hole, waving away smoke with a broken shovel blade, you notice your fingernails are now permanently black. Someone nearby coughs up something that looks like a beetle. You try not to connect the dots. The camp is eerily quiet. Charcoalers are known for working in silence. It's part superstition, part survival. Too much talking means distraction, and distraction means boom. You overhear the old man supervising mutter a warning once a clamp caught properly and exploded. Black rain for a day and a half. Historians still argue whether that tale's true or exaggerated, but carbon residue has been found scattered miles from some recorded burn sites, so maybe not entirely made up. You begin to understand the hierarchy of the factory more clearly now. Saltpeter gatherers deal with filth, but charcoal makers, they dance with fire. The risk of accidental incineration is high, and the pay is slightly better, assuming you're still breathing to collect it. By nightfall, your entire body feels baked. Every inch of skin is either crusted with black dust or raw from heat. And the smell, a smoky musk that settles deep into your pores like a campfire that had a nervous breakdown. One worker missing half an eyebrow warns you not to lie too close to the clamp when sleeping. Last boy rolled over in his sleep, he says, woke up part of the recipe. You laugh. He doesn't. And the kicker: this burn will take 3 more days to finish. Which means, yes, you're camping here. With the smoke, and the coals, and the haunting realization that you are now one poorly timed fart away from a medieval barbecue. You fall asleep that night under a makeshift canopy of soot-streaked canvas ears, ringing with owl calls, and the ever-present crackle of the slow burn. You dream of open skies, clean air, and water that doesn't taste like someone boiled a log in it. But when the morning chill hits, and you're shaken awake to feed more wood into the still glowing belly of the clamp, you don't scream or cry. You just groan, reach for your spade, and shovel like a man who knows he's now officially flammable. You've barely wiped the charcoal from your eyes when it's time for the next job grinding. And yes, it's exactly as glamorous as it sounds if your idea of glamour includes splinters, pulverized stone dust, and a constant low-level fear of spontaneous combustion. Grinding is where the real danger begins to tighten its grip. The 3 ingredients, saltpeter, charcoal, and sulfur, have now been measured out with the kind of reverent precision usually reserved for church relics or royal jewels. And now they must be blended together into the fine, deadly black powder that gives this entire grim factory its purpose. But you don't just throw everything in a sack and give it a shake like some medieval spice blend. Oh no. Each component is ground separately, first usually in a mortar and pestle, or in heavy wooden stamp mills, then sifted, then combined with the delicacy of a wedding cake. A very angry, explosive wedding cake. Your station is the mill house. Inside enormous pestles made of oak thump rhythmically into stone basins like giants hammering dough. Some are operated by hand, some by donkey, and if you're especially cursed, you're assigned to the manual crank, which you are, because of course you are. Each turn sends the wheel creaking, the pestle dropping the powder, puffing ever so slightly into the air. And that's the real danger dust. A single floating spark, even from a wool sleeve dragging on dry timber, can send the entire building into the sky, which is why the factory has strict grinding rules. No metal tools, no shoes with nails, no laughing. Seriously. Someone in France allegedly lost a leg when his sleeve button sparked against a millstone while joking about flatulence. You breathe through a damp cloth, but the dust still seeps in. It coats your teeth with bitterness and irritates the inside of your nose until sneezing feels like a mortal sin. Behind you, a supervisor taps the wall, twice your signal to pause. He listens, frowns, then continues. Even the rhythm of the pestles must remain perfect, lest uneven pressure cause a friction burst. Mainstream historical fact: by the late medieval period, gunpowder production in Europe became increasingly regulated, especially after entire towns were blown off the map. Special powder mills were built outside city walls in isolated valleys or behind earthen berms designed to redirect blast waves. One famous explosion in Delft, 1654, a bit post-medieval but iconic, leveled hundreds of houses when a powder store went up. It became known as the thunderclap. You glance at the damp wooden walls around you and can't help wondering, would your valley echo if you exploded? Would the goats care? Fringe tidbit: some regions soaked their powders in wine or brandy during mixing, supposedly to settle the spirits. Some historians think it actually helped reduce static. Others think it just helped workers care a little less about dying horribly. Historians still argue whether the grinding process was universally standardized by the 1400s. Some manuscripts describe pounding everything together from the start. Others stress the corning method, wetting the mix and pressing it into cakes before drying and granulating. Either way, you now understand why every worker looks half-haunted. Grinding doesn't just wear on your muscles, it frays your nerves. Every scrape, every creak, every footfall is a possible endgame. And when lunch arrives, coarse bread, a few salted onions and a mug of watery ale, you eat in silence. Your hands still coated with black residue, your mouth too dry to enjoy anything. No one says grace. Around here, survival is thanks enough. At one point, a young lad forgets to pause the crank for inspection. The foreman doesn't shout. He just walks over, grabs the boy's sleeve, and tears it off entirely. "Loose cloth kills," he mutters. The boy nods, wide-eyed, now sleeveless. By sunset, your spine feels like it's been run through a wine press. You've ground the same 3 ingredients for 10 hours, and you're pretty sure you'll be grinding them in your dreams. Possibly while on fire. But hey, at least you still have eyebrows. When your shift moves to corning, you almost feel relieved. Almost. Until you realize this step involves pressing the volatile powder into cakes, and then breaking it up again into small, uniform grains, each one still packed with the quiet rage of a dragon with a stubbed toe. You shuffle into the corning shed, which has even stricter rules than the grinding mill. You're now wearing soft linen slippers, your sleeves are tied off, and every tool you touch is either wood bronze or horn. Even your breath feels too loud. You move like a ghost in a room that could scream. The powder mix is first wetted, yes, deliberately dampened. Not out of mercy, but necessity. Wetting reduces the risk of accidental explosion during pressing, and more importantly, it helps bind the mix into cakes. These heavy slabs are then dried and crushed into small grains or corns, which burn far more evenly than a loose blend. You load a cake into the wooden corning press. This medieval monstrosity uses a hand crank and wooden screws to squeeze the mass between 2 slabs. There's a satisfying squelch, a soft hiss of moisture escaping, and then silence. You hold your breath because any sudden crack, any stray jolt, and you're paced on a wall. Mainstream fact time: the corning process marked a major leap in gunpowder stability. Before the 14th century, powder was mixed dry and loose, which meant it often separated into components during transport, making it dangerously unpredictable. Corning fixed that by creating uniform, compact grains that ignited evenly and stored better. But of course, corning also came with risks. For one thing, the drying process took days. You'd lay the cakes out on racks in sun-warmed sheds, rotating them every few hours. If it rained, you had to move them fast, because wet powder is moody, but re-wetted powder is just vengeful. And let's not even talk about powder that's almost dry. That's like handing a toddler a knife and saying, "Just don't run." Once dry, the cakes are ready for granulation. This is where your heart really starts to race. You take a cake, black hard, oddly heavy, and place it under the corning rollers. Thick wooden drums lined with wooden teeth turned slowly by hand or animal. The goal is to crush the cake into pebble-sized bits, sieve them into consistent sizes, and then set them aside for final drying. That's it. Simple in theory, but not in execution. The wooden gears creak, and the pressure required is no joke. Your shoulder groans with every push, your knees lock up from bracing, and the faint scent of sulfur clings to everything. Your clothes, your hair, your skin. By now your sweat runs gray. Fringe tidbit, some regions actually sang very soft work songs during this step, usually rhythmic chants or breathy hums to help keep pace. Whisper singing while grinding explosives. That's humanity for you. Historians still argue whether every factory used the same granule sizing. Some accounts favor fine, sand-like grains for muskets. Others insist larger pebbles burned better for cannons. The truth likely varied by region, weapon, and warlord whim. Midway through the day, a junior worker drops a cake. It hits the floor hard, cracking in half with a thump. Everyone freezes. No one breathes. Then mercifully nothing. The foreman walks over, leans in close, and whispers something none of you can hear. The boy nods, pale as cheese, and is promptly sent to work manure detail for the next month. Powder work has no room for butterfingers. You wrap your day with aching hands and twitchy eyes, stacking your final batch of black powder corns like they're sleeping cobras. Then you mop the floor. Yes, even the floor must be kept spotless. Stray powder, even a pinch, can turn a footstep into an obituary. At least back in the dormitory, the air doesn't sting your throat. Though it does smell like a cross between moldy straw and singed armpits. But honestly, you're getting used to it. You curl onto your shared pallet bones, sore hair stiff with dust, dreaming not of love or freedom, but of a day when you don't wake up wondering if you'll combust before breakfast. The next morning, you wake to the clatter of clogs and the reek of unwashed tunics. There's no rooster here, just a half-blind man ringing a cracked bell and yelling, "Move, or you'll miss the clean water." You don't run, but your shuffle is enthusiastic. Today's task, polishing and packaging, which sounds like it involves ribbons and gentle buffing. Spoiler, it doesn't. You trudge to the packing room, a low timber-beamed chamber filled with barrels dust and quiet fear. Polishing the powder is one final safety step. You're not buffing it for aesthetics. You're trying to knock off the smallest bits of powder dust because fine dust ignites much faster than chunky granules. Left alone, that dust would make storage and transport far more explosive than it already is. So you place the grains into a rotating wooden barrel, a drum coated inside with animal hide or rough cloth, and spin it slowly. No metal, no sudden jostles, just endless rhythmic turning. The friction smooths the powder into a uniform finish while sloughing off the excess dust into a collection bin. It's oddly hypnotic, until your brain reminds you that you're sitting inches from a barrel that would prefer to become a fireball. Once polished, the grains are sifted one final time using wooden sieves with different mesh sizes. Large ones go for cannons, medium for muskets, and small for pistols and fuses. Everything has its boom-sized destiny. Mainstream fact, gunpowder was typically stored in oak barrels sealed with waxed cloth or resin-soaked leather and labeled by both type and batch. Consistency meant life or death on the battlefield too weak, and a cannonball flops out like a disappointed pancake. Too strong, and it shatters the barrel in a fiery tantrum. The barrels themselves are gently packed grain by grain. You use wooden scoops, bent spoons, or even your hands wiped hourly, inspected daily. No one talks above a whisper. A single sneeze once set off a small crate in Ghent legend, says when the powder dust cloud got dense enough and someone tried to stifle a noseful. Whether that tale's true or not, historians still argue whether it was a sneeze or a spark from a boot hobnail. Either way, someone learned the hard way that sinuses are not to be trusted near explosives. Here's the fringe part. Some factories added colored chalk or ground minerals to powder batches, not for flair, but to distinguish whose batch was whose. Like medieval brand logos, but deadlier. If your powder blew up prematurely or underperformed, your mark was on it. There were even rumors of sabotage between rival producers slipping in bad charcoal or moisture to ruin a competitor's batch. Once packed barrels are moved with careful trolleys along slatted floors. You never lift one alone, too heavy, too risky. And if you drop it, you're not just fired, you're banned for life. There are even whispers of men disappearing after mistakes like that, though it's just as likely they left town out of shame and singed eyebrows. By midday, your muscles ache from the slow, deliberate movement. You crave suddenness, a yawn, a stretch, a sprint. But you know better. Fast equals boom. So you make peace with slowness. You embrace the ritual of the work, wipe hands, scoop gently. Barrel roll, foot slide, blink, but never sneeze. Lunch is late and bland. More root mash, more hard bread, more watered ale. But this time, there's a gift, a soft pear from a visiting merchant traded for 2 cartridges of pistol powder. You bite in, and for a moment, life tastes like something other than charcoal and fear. You return to finish stacking the day's barrels, each marked and wax sealed. The warehouse smells like sulfur and damp oak, and as you walk between the rows, you wonder how many of these casks will make it to battlefields, and how many will explode on the cart ride there. The work is nearly done. Your hands are blackened. Your tunic clings with sweat. But you survived another day, polishing death. And you didn't sneeze. Twilight in the gunpowder factory doesn't bring peace. It brings inspection. Just when you think you can finally lean against a wall and fantasize about dry socks, in comes the foreman, trailed by 2 scribes with wax tablets and suspicious eyes. They're not here to check your posture. They're here to see if today's powder is up to snuff, or if someone's going to spend the night cleaning up after a failed batch. The tests are simple, terrifying, and weirdly theatrical. One method involves placing a small cone of powder on a stone slab, lighting it with a glowing coal on the end of a stick, and measuring how long it burns. Too fast. Dangerous. Too slow. Useless. Just right. You get to keep your job and your eyebrows. Mostly. You stand with the others, breath held, as the powder cone is lit. It flares, sizzles, and leaves a fine scorch on the slab. The scribe nods. You pretend to exhale calmly, but inside you're already planning to light a candle tonight in thanks if your room weren't so flammable. Mainstream fact: in the 14th and 15th centuries, European armies began building entire powder magazines, dedicated buildings for storing gunpowder away from towns, sometimes even surrounded by moats or earthworks. They knew how volatile this stuff was, and if they were scared enough to build a moat around it, you should be concerned too. Another test involves smell, yes, actual sniffing. An experienced nose can detect if the saltpeter content is too low, or if the powder's been exposed to moisture. If it smells like swamp socks or old cabbage, it's ruined. You wince when your batch is next in line, but miraculously it passes with a polite grunt. Here's where it gets quirky. In some towns there were powder monks, not literal monks, but elderly workers paid just to smell powder all day. Their sinuses were considered sacred tools. You've never met one, but the stories make them sound like some odd mashup of alchemist and bloodhound. They say one guy in Bruges could tell the wood source of the charcoal just by sniffing the barrel. Pine, willow, alder, he claimed, each had a signature. Historians still argue whether he was a genius or just perpetually high on sulfur fumes. Once your lot is deemed safe, the barrels are sealed with warm wax and tagged with the maker's mark. You get a little notch on the ledger too, a tally of how many batches you've survived. A few workers collect those notches like war medals. Others say it's tempting fate to count. As night falls, something strange happens. A shift in energy. The quiet tension of the day gives way to a twitchy kind of giddiness. You made it. No sparks, no funerals, no limb reassignments. The workers lean back, laugh too hard at terrible jokes, and kick off their wooden clogs to air out their blistered feet. One guy, Mathis, with the missing earlobe, pulls out a battered fiddle and starts playing a crooked tune. It's not good, but it's better than silence. You clap along, gingerly. No one dances. That would be too much like tempting the powder spirits. You gather your things, your belt, your lunch tin, your powder-stained gloves, and head to the bunkhouse. You pass under lanterns deliberately spaced far from the factory walls, and beneath each one, a guard stands watch. Not to keep you in, but to make sure no one breaks in to steal the powder. Turns out the only thing more dangerous than making the stuff is selling it to the wrong people. Your cot is stiff. The shared blanket smells like 5 generations of sweat. But it's a bed, and your lungs are still functioning. You lie there listening to the slow snore of the room, wondering if the headache behind your eyes is from fatigue, or just another day's worth of sulfur in your sinuses. Either way, you promise yourself one thing tomorrow, no matter what you're bringing, a clean handkerchief. Just in case. You wake before dawn. Not because you're rested, don't be silly, but because someone's already coughing in the bunk next to you, hacking up what sounds like a lungful of chalk dust. Gunpowder air never really leaves your lungs. It just settles deeper, waits patiently, and shows up as a rattle in your chest each morning. You sit up, stretch your aching spine, and feel the familiar crunch of saltpeter residue around your fingernails. Delicious. There's no proper breakfast, just stale bread and a skin of sour ale served beside a cracked basin where 5 of you take turns splashing your faces. You've accepted that you're basically seasoning yourself in nitrates. At this point, your pores might just start glowing. Still, something's different today. A whisper floats through the yard. A visitor is coming. Not just anyone, but a royal emissary. Apparently the king or duke, or maybe just a particularly ambitious baron, is preparing for a siege and wants to inspect the powder firsthand. You know what that means. A frantic scramble to pretend everything is not the constant threat of accidental vaporization. The factory is cleaner than you've ever seen it. Soot is scrubbed from the brick walls. The usual piles of damp rags and broken barrels are mysteriously gone. Even the dog that usually limps around sniffing for rat stew is nowhere to be found. You joke to the others that he's probably wearing a tiny hat and greeting the emissary at the gate. Mainstream fact, gunpowder became the defining military tool of late medieval Europe. It didn't just change battles, it changed politics. Whoever controlled the biggest, most stable supply of powder controlled the battlefield. Monarchs invested heavily in state-run powder mills, often staffed by conscripted laborers or war prisoners. The foreman lines you all up like children before a school visit. Shirts tucked, hands clean, no coughing. When the emissary finally appears, draped in velvets and wearing gloves so fine they'd ignite near a furnace, he sniffs the air like he's above all this. He is. Literally. He's standing on a raised wooden platform so he doesn't have to walk on the commoner dirt. He asks questions. Where does the saltpeter come from? You resist saying P-Barnes. How is the powder dried? You watch the foreman lie confidently about sun-drying techniques you've never seen used. Then with great ceremony he lights a tiny demonstration charge carefully prepared by the best worker here. Probably not you. And the bang echoes through the courtyard. Everyone claps politely. You flinch. The emissary leaves just as quickly, his retinue trailing behind him like bored peacocks. The moment the gates close, you all collapse back into the familiar posture of people who've barely survived another day of theater. The factory returns to its true form, smoky, anxious, and just slightly too flammable for comfort. Fringe fact. In 16th century France, powder testers reportedly wore metal masks to shield their faces during the more experimental burns. One guy even created a leather apron lined with chainmail. Historians still argue whether these safety measures were widespread or just desperate inventions by workers with particularly bad luck. You can't help but think, where's mine? The rest of the day passes in a haze. You're too tired to worry about the blister that's now bleeding through your sock, or the powder dust collecting in the crease of your elbow, or the fact that no one's sure if next week's shipment of sulfur will even arrive, thanks to bandits on the trade route. You scrape out the last of your barrel, your final load for the day. It's a good batch, fine, dry, not too clumpy. You pour it carefully, watching the dark gray river slide through your fingers. In this world, even something as deadly as gunpowder can look beautiful in the right light. Your muscles ache, your nose burns, but you survived. Again, just before nightfall, you walk to the back of the factory grounds, where a small willow tree leans over a narrow ditch. Some workers come here to smoke cheap herbs, others to wash their shirts. You sit quietly watching the last rays of sun catch in the clouds of dust, still drifting over the rooftops. There's a strange pride in it all, isn't there? You risk your life each day for a product no one dares store in their home for a job that doesn't guarantee tomorrow. Yet here you are, covered in powder, half deaf, probably a little toxic, but very much alive. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Now that the sparks have faded and the barrels are sealed, let's step away from the sulfur-soaked walls and back into quiet. You've carried heavy loads, dodged sparks, and worked through coughs that don't quite go away. But in this moment, none of that matters. You're here safe in stillness. The embers of danger have cooled. The walls hum softly with sleep. Let your breathing slow. Let the residue of the day lift gently from your shoulders. Maybe tomorrow brings another barrel, another bang, but tonight there's only silence. Rest in the thought that you did something rare. You made it. Let that comfort settle like dusk over your thoughts and drift softly, gently, away. Sweet dreams. Hey guys, tonight, we're stepping into the worn leather shoes of a candle boy in a Gothic cathedral, where the air always smells like old wax. The floors are colder than a witch's handshake, and your job is to make sure the light never dies. It's before dawn. You're shivering in a robe 2 sizes too big, fumbling with flint and steel, while a sleepy monk mutters something about eternal damnation if you miss morning mass. Welcome to your shift. You probably won't survive this, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment with your location and what time it is where you're listening. I love seeing the Global Bedtime Club in action. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up in complete darkness. Not the cozy under a blanket kind, but the pitch black stone under your back. Is that a rat or a relic kind? The dormitory's chill punches through your thin wool blanket as the bell clangs out its cruel warning, time to rise. You're 11. You'd sell your soul for 5 more minutes of sleep. But souls are sort of off limits around here. You swing your legs over the wooden cot, landing on icy flagstones that jolt you fully awake. Outside your tiny window, the first hint of sky lightens from ink to soot. In the cathedral's crypt-silent belly, shadows cling to corners, and the stone walls seem to hum with leftover prayers. You're already late. Today's job candles, always candles, hundreds of them. You stumble into the main nave where the air smells of old incense and damp limestone. You fumble for the long pole with a burning taper tied to the end, a glorified stick basically, and begin your slow march from altar to apse. 1 wick, 2 wicks, 50. Your shoulders ache. Your hands are stiff. And heaven forbid you sneeze on a flame. Each candle must be perfect. Not just lit, but standing proud. No drips, no lean, no awkward flickers. Because in this century, candles aren't decoration, they're theology in wax. Light means the divine. Darkness means, well, you know. And if you mess it up, you might be blamed for divine displeasure and have to re-dip candles in a freezing vat behind the vestry. Historians still argue whether candle boys were technically part of the clergy or just expendable labor in itchy robes. But you feel more like a half-trained pyromaniac with a monastic dress code. And this cathedral, it's massive. Vaulted ceilings stretch higher than your dreams. Gargoyles leer from ledges. The acoustics are so sharp that even a whispered fart could sound like thunder. Every step echoes. Every flame casts more shadow than light. And the older boys keep whispering about Brother Hugo, who lit a candle too close to the relic cabinet and vanished. Suspiciously. As you move down, the nave wax from yesterday's rituals still clings to the flagstones in stubborn globs. You scrape them with your little iron blade, collecting them in a basket to melt down later. Waste not want, not even if it means fingernails packed with grime, and the occasional splinter from the collection stick. The monks pass you without nodding. They've been up longer than you. Some have memorized all 150 psalms. Others have memorized where the best bread crusts are hidden. None have sympathy for your burned fingertips. Welcome to the bottom of the spiritual food chain. Oh, and did I mention bats? Yes, because these cathedrals weren't just holy, they were also excellent bat caves. You quickly learned to distinguish between a swooping shadow of divine mystery and a literal bat dive bombing your scalp. One did it during Vespers last week. Brother Mathieu screamed. You laughed. You got wall scrubbing duty for a week. Still, there's something sacred about lighting that last candle way up near the altar, the one that always burns uneven. For a moment, your arm raised high, breath-held flame trembling. You feel like a little sun god in a frozen world of stone and shadows. Until, of course, the flame sputters out and drips wax on your face. Job hazard. You finish just as the choir boys arrive, snickering about something sinful sounding. You don't ask. You place the taper back in its cradle, wipe your hands on your robe, and head off to scrape soot off the sconces before anyone notices you exist. There's no glory here, no applause. Just the flicker of candlelight behind stained glass and the endless echo of your own footsteps. The sun still hasn't fully risen when you duck into the vestry, a low, musty chamber where the sacred and the sweaty mingle freely. This is where priests prepare for Mass, but you're here for your second miserable task of the day, candle maintenance. Because apparently, the Lord's light doesn't replace itself. The box is already waiting for you. A splintery crate of stubby, used-up candles and a heap of tangled wicks that look like they've been chewed by rats. Your job: sort the salvageable ones, cut new wicks, and re-dip the stubs in hot tallow until they're thick enough to stand proud on the altar again. Candle reincarnation, basically. Now, tallow is not a glamorous word. It's animal fat, and not the nice grilled kind. Think gray congealed gloop that smells faintly of medieval armpit stew. It's stored in a blackened iron pot, always warm, always sticky, and always surrounded by flies that don't care they're in the house of God. You dip a stub, count slowly to 5, then pull it out to cool eyes watering from the smell. Then again, and again, and again. It takes 20 dips to build one halfway decent taper. It's like making a wax birthday cake, 1 grain of flour at a time. You're 11, but already you've developed the patience of a Benedictine monk or a professional grudge holder. Historians still argue whether cathedrals deliberately overused candles to create a mystical atmosphere, or if it was more about showing off wealth. Either way, you're the unpaid lighting technician for God's big-budget theater. You try not to get caught daydreaming, but your mind drifts. What if one of those massive chandeliers came crashing down mid-mass? What if the bishop tripped on his robe and landed face first into the Easter Vigil candelabra? These are the thoughts that keep you going. That and the secret licorice stick you hid behind the saint statue last Tuesday. Your hands are waxy, your robe now streaked with tallow. You nick your thumb on a jagged wick trimmer and suck the blood away, paranoid that someone will see and decide your injury is somehow heretical. That's how weird things get around here. Brother Dominic once sneezed during communion and spent a week on bread and water penance because it startled the host. You bundle your finished candles into a woven basket and set off toward the Lady Chapel, where they'll be used in the evening procession. The floor creaks beneath your steps, echoing like some ghost choir following your every move. The stained glass windows glow faintly, casting long patches of blue and crimson light. Beautiful, yes, but also slippery. One of the younger candle boys broke a leg last month sliding on melted wax near the baptismal font. You remember the thud, the echo, the silence, the emergency Latin. You make it to the chapel and arrange your candles in the iron holders like sacred dominoes, some lean. You twist the bases. One flops to the side like a lazy saint. You sigh and fix it again. No one thanks you. But if a candle fails to light during a procession, you'd get blamed before the Virgin Mary. One small mercy, you get to sit for a moment. Just one. On a wooden bench carved centuries ago by someone who probably hated candle boys too. You let your body slump. Close your eyes. Listen. Birds outside, finally waking. A faint bell calling the older monks to their next prayer. The soft crackle of a taper still burning behind the altar. And beneath it all, the weirdest sound, low musical, almost like humming. Some say it's wind through the gargoyle mouths. Others whisper it's the spirits of long-dead builders trapped in the stones. Historians still argue whether Gothic acoustics were a happy accident or intentionally crafted to create that eerie, echoing resonance. You call it free spooky music. Better than the choir's off-key warm-ups anyway. Breaks over. Your candle basket, empty, your hands sticky, and your patience thin as wax. You shuffle back toward the sacristy to clean the snuffers. One more chore in a cathedral full of them. Every hallway seems darker now despite all your work. The flickering lights cast halos and shadows in equal measure. You pass the baptismal font again. Still chipped from last week's toddler incident. Still slippery. Still a lawsuit waiting to happen if lawsuits existed yet. One candle flickers out as you pass. You stop. Relight it. Whisper a little curse under your breath, something about saints and their obsession with ambiance. And then you move on the smell of tallow clinging to your skin like a second robe. You're not even halfway through your morning when the real uphill battle begins, literally. It's tower time. Every day, like some weird medieval version of a CrossFit routine, you climb the tight spiral staircase that leads into the upper galleries and belfry. The stairs are stone, of course, uneven cold, and worn concave from centuries of monkish foot traffic. Each step a different height, each turn narrowing just enough to remind you that if you trip, you're tumbling down like an unloved potato sack. You lug a fresh bundle of candles under one arm because apparently every nook in this towering hulk of a cathedral needs to be aglow with flickering holiness. There are chapels tucked into ledges, alcoves in the clerestory, even hidden corners behind the organ pipes that seem like only mice and bored choir boys should be allowed to access. But nope, candles go there too. So up you go. After the third flight, your legs burn. After the fifth, your lungs feel like someone replaced them with damp parchment. And after the seventh, you're questioning every life choice that led you here, especially the one where you impressed the bishop by reciting Psalm 23 and got promoted to this. You finally reach the triforium, a narrow gallery tucked high in the nave wall, just below the massive stained glass windows. It's beautiful, sure, but also terrifying. One wrong step and it's 40 feet down to the cold stone floor. No railing, just your wits, your sandals, and a basket of fire. You shuffle along the ledge, replacing the tiny votives set along the window bases. It's mostly symbolic light. The sun does the heavy lifting during the day, but symbol matters here. Light means God. And if God isn't twinkling in the rose window at all hours, someone's gonna get a talking to. And that someone is usually you. Historians still argue whether these elevated galleries were designed for structural reasons, symbolic ascent, or just to make candle boys cry. You lean toward the third option. You finish the triforium and head up again. More stairs. These are steeper, darker. The kind of place horror movies would set their opening scenes if cameras had been invented. You light your own way now, one of your homemade tapers stuck in a wooden lantern. Every shadow leaps like it's got unfinished business. Eventually you emerge into the bell tower. The air changes immediately. Cold. Dry. It smells of pigeons and dust older than your great-grandfather. The massive bells hang overhead, silent and hulking like sleeping giants. You don't get too close. You know what happens when they wake. Brother Alaric, the bell ringer, once let you watch him yank the ropes. Once. The thunder that followed nearly knocked you out of your shoes. The stone vibrated. The pigeons exploded into the air like gray popcorn. And the sound. You felt it in your ribs, in your teeth, possibly in your future nightmares. You never went near the ropes again. But you still have to light the lanterns set along the tower walls. A strange touch, considering daylight pours in through arrow slits all around. But again, this is medieval cathedral logic: more fire, more God. You mutter the same half-prayer under your breath as you light each flame. Not for piety, just for rhythm. And because if the bishop's assistant catches you working silently, you might get tagged for penance. Apparently, silence breeds temptation, or laziness, or invisible demons. Depends on which monk you ask. While lighting one of the highest lanterns, you notice a shape in the corner. A soot-smudged piece of graffiti carved into the stone behind a bell strut. You squint. It's a face crudely drawn, tongue sticking out. Below it in Latin, the word lupus. You grin. Lupus was a candle boy, 50 years ago, the story goes. Ran away with a traveling troupe of musicians. Legend says he left rude carvings all through the upper cathedral like spiritual Easter eggs. Some say he went on to marry a baker's daughter and opened a pie stall in Lyon. Others say the bishop tracked him down and had him reassigned to candle duty in the catacombs. Historians still argue whether these rogue markings are acts of rebellion-coded prayers or just boys being boys. You decide Lupus was a hero. You light your last tower lantern glance once more at the bell ropes with a healthy dose of nope and begin the long, knee-creaking descent. The stairwell seems darker on the way down. The walls feel closer, and the basket feels heavier even though it's mostly empty. You pass the triforium again and whisper, still here to yourself, just to hear your voice. Just to prove the tower didn't eat you. Then back to the main floor. Back to the smell of incense. Back to the next job, waiting for you, like a judgmental saint with a clipboard. The bishop's voice finds you before you see him, sharp, nasal, and echoing, far too dramatically for someone in sandals. You're halfway to the sacristy when he flags you down with a wave that somehow manages to look both dismissive and summoning. Classic. You he calls. Yes, the small one with soot in your hair. There's wax buildup under St. Theodoric's toes. Fix it. Right. Theodoric. That poor marble statue hasn't moved since 1238, but for some reason it's your job to keep his alabaster feet pristine. You pivot sigh and trudge toward the northern transept where Theodoric stands, forever frozen in a posture that suggests chronic back pain and holy disapproval. As you kneel to scrape the wax buildup, you wonder why they don't just melt it off with hot water. Then you remember last week's melting incident, where a younger candle boy accidentally set the hem of a tapestry on fire. You helped beat it out with a hymn book. Miraculously, the fire stopped, possibly because of divine intervention, but more likely because the book was 400 pages of water-stained psalms. So now it's scraping only, very medieval, very manual. Behind Theodoric, the afternoon light is streaming through the stained glass. It bathes the nave in hues of red and gold, casting the saints' stories in kaleidoscopic flicker. It's stunning, really. So stunning, in fact, that you almost forget you're kneeling in old candle drippings, scraping wax, like a deranged baker. Historians still argue whether candle boys were considered sacred assistants or disposable labor. Given that no one bothers to learn your name, and everyone refers to you as the one with the arms, you lean toward the second option. Once Theodoric is wax-free and gleaming like a smug saint on cleaning day, you head toward the choir stalls. These intricately carved wooden seats are works of art, each one bursting with Gothic details, like twisting vines, grumpy lions, and angels, playing instruments that look suspiciously like medieval bagpipes, which frankly is just a bladder with a mouthpiece. Still counts. You've got to refill the hidden candle niches beneath the misericords, those little flip-up seats monks lean on during long hours of standing prayer. You've never heard a monk say, "Thank you," but you've seen them lean just a bit easier when you've done your job right. It's a small victory. You take it. As you work, you notice one of the carvings under the seat, a monkey riding a goat, both wearing crowns. You blink. Yep, that's real. You have no idea what it means. Historians still argue whether such imagery was intended as satire, demonic warning, or just a bored woodcarver trying to get fired. You mumble aloud. Somewhere nearby, an organist tests a few chords. The sound vibrates through the bones of the church like the whole building is humming with half-formed song. You pause and let it wash over you, the warmth of the pipes balancing the chill of the stone. And then the smell hits you. Smoke. Not incense, not beeswax, real acrid smoke. You bolt toward the nave, skidding past startled monks and wide-eyed choir boys. There, at the base of the pulpit, is a toppled candle flames licking up the edge of a tapestry. Again, with the tapestries, without hesitation, you fling your half-empty wax bucket at it. Not exactly a fire brigade move, but it works. The flame sputters. The tapestry sizzles, curls in on itself like a wounded leaf, and dies. A beat of silence, then applause. No joke, actual honest to St. Nicholas clapping. You blink. The bishop claps. A few monks nod. Even the grumpy sacristan gives you a shrug that might be approval. Then someone barks, "Replace that candle, and don't just stand there." And just like that, the moment's over. Back to work. Later, after you've placed the new taper and double-checked all surrounding tapestries for flammability, you retreat to the cloister garden for a 5-minute break. You're not supposed to be there, but candle boys have secret privileges, like unofficial hideouts, and knowing which monks snore during vespers. You lie on the bench under a rose bush, arms stretched out, smelling of soot and beeswax, watching a butterfly loop lazily in the heat. You think about how you'll never be remembered, not by name, maybe not even by role, but the candles will glow. The saints will look righteous. The church will breathe light through stained glass long after you're gone. And maybe, just maybe, some future candle boy will find your graffiti in a high corner and smile. You're jolted awake by the sound of a bell again. Not the majestic tolling from the tower, but the smaller, shriller handbell that means you forgot something important, and now someone very powerful is annoyed. You scramble upright, heart pounding, like you've just sinned in front of 3 saints and a pope. Turns out it's Brother Allard, red in the face, pointing at the Paschal candle. It's out. It should never ever be out. You sprint back inside, dodging 2 elderly nuns and the incense-swinging acolyte, who looks like he hasn't blinked since Easter. The Paschal candle, taller than you, fat as a soup pot, carved with intricate symbols of resurrection, is sitting there shamefully dark. It looks more like a breadstick than a sacred light. Your hands move on autopilot. Wick trimmed, beeswax replenished, flame borrowed from the sanctuary lamp. The moment it flickers to life, Brother Allard exhales like he's been holding his breath since Pentecost. You expect a thank you. You get "You'll polish the reliquary tomorrow." Awesome. The reliquary is a silver and glass container holding what may or may not be a fragment of St. Blaise's toe. No one's quite sure. Historians still argue whether relics like these were authentic symbolic or just clever marketing. Regardless, they're covered in dust and impossible to clean without feeling like you're committing sacrilege. After dinner, which is surprise bread again, you're summoned to the scriptorium. That's not your usual turf, but the illuminators need help. Apparently, one of them spilled ink all over a newly gilded D in a manuscript and fled the scene, leaving chaos in his wake. They don't trust anyone with actual quills, but you can be trusted to bring wax for sealing hold lamps steady and occasionally fetch a cat to chase mice. The scriptorium is a place of quiet chaos. Manuscripts are everywhere, half-dried, half-destroyed. Some with elaborate margins featuring rabbits jousting on snails. Real imagery. Historians love to argue about that one too. Did the monks have a twisted sense of humor? Or were they genuinely terrified of armored mollusks? You stand beside the lead illuminator, a woman named Sister Jeanne, who once painted a peacock so realistic, it fooled an actual peacock. She mutters to herself as she touches up gold leaf with a squirrel hair brush, her forehead glistening under candlelight. You're the one turning the pages so she can work without smudging. It's terrifying. One wrong move, and boom, a week's worth of work ruined. You try not to breathe too hard. She notices your tension, and finally says something kind. You have steady hands. That's rare. You grin like you've just been knighted. When the page is complete, you help carry it to the drying rack, and then back to the candle store. The candle store, despite its fancy name, is really a cramped, wax-smelling closet where tapers hang like rows of pale sausages. It's here that you notice one of the shelves is sagging. You put your foot on the bottom one to check, crack, then collapse. Tapers tumble like dominoes, and you're buried under about 80 pounds of wax. It's not painful, just humiliating. You wriggle out like a beetle covered in squashed candles, looking like a particularly unholy snowman. The sacristan catches sight of you and starts laughing so hard, he wheezes. It's the first time you've ever heard him laugh. You feel absurdly proud. Back in your bunk that night, you scratch a tiny mark into the underside of your cot. One mark for each completed day. The beam looks like a tally board now. Every line is a victory. Every day survived one more candle lit, one more disaster, dodged one more laugh earned. You fall asleep imagining yourself years from now, maybe promoted to assistant sacristan, maybe in charge of your own candle boys, maybe even telling them stories about when you were the one with the arms. The moon glows faintly through the stained glass above your cot, filtered through saints and symbols. You swear Saint Blaise just winked at you, and you sleep. You wake to the familiar sound of boots on stone. Not heavy like the cannons, this is the soft shuffle of lay brothers heading to prime. It's still dark, but that's nothing new. You're already stretching before your eyes are even open, your joints creaking like the ancient choir stalls. Today is a feast day, which in theory should be uplifting. But for you it means double duty. Feast days mean full processions, extra masses, incense, thick as gravy, and candles. So many candles you briefly wonder if you're just reenacting the burning of Rome in slow motion. First task, fill the wheel chandelier. You shuffle across the cold stone in your too thin shoes and crane your neck up at the iron monstrosity hanging above the nave. 48 candle sockets. No one knows who thought that was a good number. Historians still argue whether it symbolized divine completeness or someone just ran out of iron at a weird time. The wheel swings slightly in the early morning draft, and you steel yourself. Climbing the ladder that high should require a vow of insanity, but you do it anyway. One taper in your teeth, two in each sleeve, and a pouch at your belt. Your fingers are numb halfway through. The smoke curls upward, the wax begins to drip, and slowly the cathedral transforms. What was cavernous and foreboding becomes warm and golden, like stepping into a sunrise made of silence and song. And then clank the latch on the tower gate sticks again. You descend only to be told you need to prep the votive stands near the Virgin's altar. One candle per prayer, and apparently the townsfolk are very chatty with Mary today. There are already dozens flickering, and Sister Clotilda says the Virgin prefers beeswax over tallow. You aren't sure Mary would care, but you're not arguing with Clotilda. She once silenced a bishop with just a stare. You refill each slot fingers, moving faster than your thoughts. But one tiny girl with pigtails keeps trying to poke her finger into the flames. Her mother is deep in prayer, eyes closed, whispering in Latin that she clearly doesn't understand. The girl giggles every time you glare. Finally, she holds out a coin and asks, "Can I light one for my dog?" You pause. "Did your dog die?" She nods solemnly. "Okay, then," you say and hand her a taper. She lights it with great reverence, mutters something under her breath, possibly woof, and places it next to St. Francis. Not standard protocol, but honestly it might be the most sincere prayer offered all day. You reward yourself with a brief moment near the rose window. It's mid-morning now, and the sunlight streams through in bursts of color, blues, golds, crimson reds. Tiny rainbows scatter across the stone floor, dancing with the smoke from your handiwork. You think about how many candles you've lit since you started here. Hundreds, thousands. All to illuminate the divine, to chase away shadows both real and imagined. And yet there's still so much darkness. This thought follows you into the crypt later, where you've been sent to replace the oil in the sanctuary lamp. The crypt is chilly damp and full of tombs. If your daily chores are like mini survival quests, the crypt is the final boss fight. You clutch your taper tight, every creak sounding like a ghost with unfinished business. You refill the lamp and relight it with steady hands. The flame quivers for a moment, then holds. You breathe. It's here, surrounded by the bones of bishops and forgotten saints, that the job really hits you. You're not just a candle boy. You're a memory keeper, a guardian of light in a place built to honor death. You're the quiet, unnoticed flicker that makes all this grandeur visible. Of course, right after that poetic thought, you bump your head on a stone arch and nearly drop the lamp. Saint Yvette, whose bones are reportedly sealed behind that very wall, might have rolled her eyes. Back above ground, you're greeted by the scent of feast day bread. Actual bread, this time with herbs. You take your slice like it's treasure chewing as you collapse into your nook behind the apse. You've survived another feast day, another 1,000 flames, another fall from a ladder, okay, more of a dramatic slide. But you're still here, still lighting the dark. You wake to aching knees and candle wax in your hair. Well, not quite wake. You never fully fell asleep, just dozed, curled behind the apse soot on your cheek. Dreams flickering like wicks caught in a draft. Someone somewhere is still singing. Gregorian chants spill through the cloister like fog, warm and heavy, with Latin syllables you half recognize. Today's not a feast day, but it is Bishop Inspection Day, which, if you're being honest, is even worse. The bishop arrives before dawn, flanked by officials, records keepers, and that one priest who always smells like boiled onions. Their boots echo off the nave stones like cannon fire. You scramble to look less filthy, less bent, more candle-boyish, whatever that means. There's something oddly militaristic about these inspections. Everyone stands straighter, speaks softer, harder. Even the abbot smiles too much. Historians still argue whether these inspections were genuine spiritual audits or just excuses for bishops to flex their power over ambitious abbots. Either way, it means stress for you. You've been tasked with relighting the 7-branched candelabrum near the high altar. Gold leaf dragon feet the whole ornate circus. Each arm curves like a bishop's staff, and each cup has to be polished to a mirror shine. You do your best with linen and vinegar, but the brass doesn't love you today. One stubborn smudge refuses to leave like it's personally offended by your presence. As you light the candles, your sleeve catches slightly on the scrollwork. For a moment you imagine it all toppling, 7 flames, cartwheeling across the floor, the bishop's vestments going up like parchment. You swallow hard and move slower. The bishop watches from afar, his face unreadable eyes trained on the flame tips like he's judging their righteousness. Or yours. Then he turns to the abbot and says, "Fine. Acceptable. Acceptable. You've burned your fingertips balanced on precarious ladders and risked second-hand asphyxiation from incense clouds so thick they could choke a demon, and it's just acceptable. Whatever." You skulk away to the side chapel and take comfort in the small things, like the one lone candle by the statue of Saint Apollonia, patron saint of toothaches. No one visits her much, but you like her. She's got a gentle face and holds a pair of pliers. You light her candle every day out of habit. A weird sort of friendship. Lunch is a slab of barley bread and thin cheese. One of the choir boys trades you a dried plum for 2 chunks of wax. Apparently he's molding a tiny statue of St. Peter for his mother. You admire the dedication. Also, you're not sure you were supposed to give him that wax, but Peter would have approved of the barter. Later that day, you're told to prep for Compline, the final service. The church must glow, not blaze. Soft pools of light, not blinding columns. There's a quiet art to this, and you know it well. You choose the tapers that burn slowest. You trim every wick. You adjust the spacing so shadows fall where the monks find comfort, not distraction. This part you love, not because it's easy, it isn't, but because it feels sacred. When the monks file in, hoods up, eyes down, and the first words of the Psalms echo beneath the ribs of the vaulted ceiling, something in your chest settles. This is what all the ash in the eyes, wax on the fingers chaos leads to serenity. Warmth, stillness, and there, in the final breath of the day, you spot a small boy, you probably the stablemaster's nephew, staring wide-eyed at the candlelight dancing across the transept wall. His mouth hangs open in awe. You remember that look. You had it too once. So you edge over, hand him a stub of wax, and whisper, Press your thumb in while it's warm. It holds your mark. He does. A tiny thumbprint in beeswax. A nothing moment, yet something timeless. You wonder briefly if you'll still be here next year, or if you'll graduate to choir boy or library scribe, or maybe disappear into the world outside these walls. Candle boys don't usually get epic stories, but maybe, just maybe, you'll get a life that's a little more than acceptable. The chant ends. Silence returns. You snuff the final flame fingers steady. Another day illuminated. You're up before the bells again. That's the thing they never tell you about living in a cathedral. You always wake before the bells. The chimes follow you, not the other way around. You rise in the gray, half-light eyes, gummy limbs heavy, and pad barefoot down the stone corridor. Your breath puffs in the cold morning air, and your toes ache with every step. Today is your turn to clean out the candle vault. You didn't even know the cathedral had a candle vault until they assigned it to you. Turns out it's a narrow crawl space tucked beneath the sacristy stairs, stuffed with boxes of stubs, unused wicks, drippings in cloth sacks, and those odd misshapen rejects from failed pours. The place smells like scorched honey and mold. You duck your head and stoop low. It's rat territory, and you're not about to let one run up your cassock. There's a quiet horror to the vault. Mismatched candles, half melted into strange wax sculptures, line the walls, like forgotten saints. One looks exactly like a melting goose. Another, definitely a sad pope. You set to work separating reusable scraps from actual trash. It's mindless, monotonous, and let's be real, soul-crushing. You hum an off-key hymn to break the silence. Something about light and redemption. You forget the words halfway through, but that's all right. Pretty sure even the saints forget the lyrics sometimes. Above you, the cathedral begins to stir. Choir voices drift through the ceiling cracks. Someone drops a metal tray. A monk curses mildly. You smile. Feels human. Mid-morning, the deacon pokes his head in and tosses you a surprise 2 candles imported from Paris. Blue-dyed beeswax spiral-etched. Exorbitant. They're for a visiting noble, apparently, but he lets you hold one. It's smooth as soap and heavier than you expect. You almost don't want to give it back. This candle has seen more luxury in its creation than you have in your entire candleboy career. Historians still debate how accessible imported goods were to medieval clergy, especially in provincial cathedrals. Some argue they were rare and treasured. Others suggest well-connected churches could stockpile them like seasonal plums. Either way, you're not the one lighting it, just carrying it like it's the Holy Grail. By midday, your hands are sore and sticky again. You wash them in the cloister fountain, the water bitter cold. Across the courtyard, a monk scolds a pigeon for stealing crumbs. You can't tell which one looks more offended. This afternoon, you sneak into the bell tower. You're not supposed to, but it's the best spot in the entire cathedral. Quiet, a little dusty, and filled with sunbeams filtered through the high lancet windows. You lie back on the wooden beams and stare up at the rafters. There's a candle stub in your pocket. You carve little shapes into it with a bent pin. Nothing fancy. A moon, a cross, a spiral. A year ago, you wouldn't have believed you'd feel home here. It was just work obedience, another cog in the holy machine. But now you've memorized the creaks in the choir stalls, the rhythm of the lector's cough, even the tilt of every candlestick that refuses to sit straight. You're part of the cathedral now, part of its daily breath. You return just before Vespers. You light the small side chapel where no one really looks, but everyone expects to be glowing just right. You adjust a flame by hand, coaxing it like a skittish kitten. One last candle, one last flicker of heat, and then you stop. Just stand there, watching. The light pools on the floor in perfect silence. Nothing grand, nothing miraculous, just warm. It's enough. So now, as the last candle dies and the shadows climb the arches again, you rest your sore hands against your knees and exhale. The warmth fades. The wax cools. But in the stillness, there's peace. The kind only earned after long flickering days spent serving something ancient and vast. Maybe tomorrow you'll scrape wax again. Maybe not. Maybe you'll move on to scribing or bell ringing or quietly running away to become a baker's apprentice in a village that never heard of Saint Apollonia. But tonight, you're here. Present. Steady. Close your eyes. Picture the golden hush of candlelight on old stone. The scent of beeswax and incense curling into sleep. The soft echo of a world bigger than your own. And in that quiet flicker, let yourself drift. Sweet dreams. Hey guys, tonight we climb to a lonely perch at the edge of the known world, to a marvel of ancient engineering, where your only companions are smoke storms and the slow crawl of time. Welcome to the top of the Lighthouse of Pharos in ancient Alexandria. Your job: keep the fire alive. Your reward: probably lung damage and a very short retirement. You thought it'd be romantic, didn't you? A solitary post above the sparkling Mediterranean. Maybe a scroll or two by torchlight, the scent of sea breeze and roasted barley wafting through your perfectly combed beard. Yeah, no. Instead, you wake to the sun blasting straight through your eyelids and into your soul soot, crusting your nose, and a crust of pigeon droppings on your cheek that definitely wasn't there when you fell asleep. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your eyes crack open to gritty daylight and a headache that started sometime around the reign of Ptolemy II. The heat is already climbing, and you're sprawled in what used to be a respectable sleeping nook until the rats decided it made a better highway. The stones are cold in winter, boiling in summer, and weirdly damp year-round, despite being 5 stories off the ground. You roll over narrowly, avoiding a clump of feathers, and what you hope is not another lizard sacrifice. The tower groans under its own weight, ancient limestone, sweating with age and sea spray. There's no insulation up here, no relief. And the smell gods, the smell is part ash, part guano, and a twist of oily rags. You gave up trying to scrub it out of your robes weeks ago. Your shift technically ended 2 hours ago, but the guy who was supposed to relieve you, he never showed. Again. You're 90% sure he faked a foot infection so he could work the harbor docks instead, probably smuggling saffron past Roman tacksmen with a smug grin. Meanwhile, you're still here keeping the literal light of civilization burning, while Alexandria snoozes below. You drag yourself upright, every joint cracking like a papyrus scroll being unrolled. Your knees mutter threats. Your spine files a formal complaint. A seagull screeches overhead, possibly mocking your life choices. Historians still argue whether the original keeper rotation was daily, weekly, or an unholy until you drop kind of schedule. But from where you're standing, well listing slightly, it's clearly the latter. You shuffle to the edge of the viewing platform, gripping a worn stone balustrade as your reward, a panoramic view of sunlit splendor. Alexandria sprawls like a mosaic, gleaming rooftops, temple spires, marble columns, while ships bob in the harbor like fat olives in oil. It should be beautiful. It would be beautiful, if not for the fact that you're also watching a merchant vessel scraping its hull on the rocks because someone you hasn't polished the bronze reflector plates in 3 days. Oops, you'll deal with that later. First comes the mandatory inspection. Are the mirrors intact? Are the braziers still burning? Is the roof leaking again? Yes, no, and always. You jot notes on a scrap of wax tablet that's more soot than wax, now wedged into a fold of your robe that somehow always smells like goat. In the distance, the city starts waking temple bells, distant street vendors, the faint roar of the amphitheater crowd gearing up for another lion-based disappointment. And here you are, about to haul 20 clay jars of olive oil up spiral stairs that make the pyramids look ergonomic. You sigh. It's going to be another long, oily day in your sandstone oven of a home. You begin the descent, and almost immediately regret it. Your left sandal slips a fraction on the smooth, dust-slick stone step, sending a little jolt through your body, and a not-so-little string of imaginative curses through your brain. There are hundreds of these steps. Narrow, spiral, claustrophobic, worn down in the middle like a cheap shaving stone. And there's no handrail. Of course, there's no handrail. This is 3rd century BCE engineering, not a wellness resort in Crete. Down you go, knees aching, like someone stuffed clay tablets in your joints, passing old scorch marks on the wall and carvings you swear weren't there yesterday. Some are ancient graffiti, Ptolemy sucks, etched in crude Greek, and others look vaguely religious. You once asked a passing priest what one of the symbols meant. He gave you a worried look and told you not to say it out loud. You've avoided eye contact with that wall ever since. At the base level, you reach the storeroom, which smells like oil mildew and hopelessness. Dozens of clay amphorae sit stacked like bored guards. Some are cracked, some are leaking. One is hosting a very successful spider family. You wrestle 2 of the heaviest jars onto a wooden yoke, brace it over your shoulders, and begin the long climb back up. Again. That's your 3rd trip today, and it's barely mid-morning. This place eats your knees for breakfast. Historians still argue whether the Lighthouse of Pharos had an internal lift system using pulleys and counterweights, or if that's just ancient architectural fan fiction. Whatever the truth, your reality is pure human hauling. You climb, you sweat, you swear, you repeat. Halfway up you pause at a small arched window carved into the wall. The sea breeze slaps your face like a wet fish, which is refreshing for about 3 seconds. Then the salt crust starts to sting the blisters you didn't realize had formed under your tunic. Looking out, you can just make out a trireme slipping into harbor, its square sail like a toothy grin. You wonder what it would be like to just jump on one of those and vanish. Of course you'd have to abandon your post, fake your death, change your name, and hope no one recognizes you in Antioch. Tempting. Eventually you reach the upper chamber soaked in sweat and muttering to yourself like some sort of philosophical raisin. The beacon room looms ahead, a wide, echoing chamber with a massive open hearth at its center and rows of polished bronze reflector plates along the walls when they're not warped smoke-stained or playing host to yet more birds. The whole thing's basically a glorified death oven. You dump the jars by the hearth, hands raw from the weight. Your arms are trembling, your vision's gone a bit fuzzy, and you seriously consider lying down for just 5, maybe 7 minutes. But that's when you hear the sound, the one that curdles your blood every time. Drip, drip, drip. It's coming from the ceiling again. Rainwater from last week's storm, working its way through the stone layers like a passive-aggressive curse. It's going to short the flame if it hits the center again. You'll have to climb onto the support beams and wedge a scrap of linen into the gap, a move that last time almost ended with you dangling by your belt above the fire like a badly timed acrobat. And if the fire goes out, that's not just a bad day at work. That's ships wrecked on the rocks. That's angry merchants. That's the prefect summoning you for a disciplinary bath in the harbor. Ancient job security is a funny thing. As you shuffle across the floor, a pigeon flutters past your face, drops something disrespectful on your shoulder, and disappears into a smoke vent. You don't even flinch. You've accepted the pigeons are in charge now. Maybe they were always in charge. You reach the tool chest, tucked under a cracked mirror. It's a splintery old thing, filled with soot-blackened tongs, spare wicks, and something that may once have been a sacred torch, but now functions mostly as a doorstop. You grab the oil funnel and begin refilling the flame basin, humming an off-key hymn to keep your spirits up. It doesn't work. By the time you're finished, your tunic is soaked with sweat and oil. Your fingers are stained brown. Your neck feels like it's turning to marble. And you still have the afternoon shift to look forward to. Just another glorious morning in ancient Alexandria. You're really living the dream. You'd think keeping a flame going would be simple. You light it, you feed it, you walk away, whistling. Not here. Not on top of the Lighthouse of Pharos, where the flame is less like a cozy campfire and more like an insatiable smoky beast that's always hungry, always cranky, and definitely trying to kill you. It starts with the wick, which is not your typical candle string. No, you're working with braided flax cords as thick as your fingers, soaked in who knows what, and laid out in a precise crisscross pattern. If it's crooked, the fire sputters. If it's too tight, it smothers. If it's too loose, it roars up and scorches the ceiling. You learned that the hard way on week 2. Still have the eyebrow scar to prove it. Then there's the wood. Dry timber chopped small, carried up from the harbor and stored in the barely a roof shed. You always need more than you think. Alexandria has no shortage of sun, but keeping a constant night-piercing flame visible from 20 miles out. That's another matter. Some say the beam could blind a sailor at sea. You just wish it would blind the inspector who keeps dropping by to comment on your stacking technique. Bronze mirrors, dozens of them, line the walls of the upper chamber, angled just so to concentrate the light into a beam. And you are in charge of polishing every single one, daily, with your own spit sand and a scrap of goat wool. Historians still argue whether these reflectors were fixed or adjustable. You could end the debate, just hand them your tendinitis and your sand-scoured palms as proof. One time, during a festival, some philosopher, probably drunk on honey wine, suggested using polished obsidian instead of bronze. You laughed so hard you dropped an oil jar. That suggestion is still scrawled on the back wall in charcoal. Try obsidian. Trust me, Demetrius. You do not trust Demetrius. And then, there are the birds. You cannot overstate the problem of birds. They love the warm air, the open windows, the height. They think you built this tower for them. They nest in the rafters. They strut across the mirrors. One of them, a chubby gray menace you've named Prince Tolabird, has taken to stealing your lunch and pooping with exacting accuracy on your reports. You've stopped fighting him. He always wins. You pause to adjust a crooked reflector again. It's warped from last month's heat wave, and despite your best hammer taps, it keeps slipping out of alignment. The beam it casts dances across the far wall, sometimes catching the carved stone in a way that looks like fire leaping. That used to scare you. Now it's just Tuesday, and yet you can't let the light die. That's your core duty, your sacred oath. If the fire falters, ships crash. If the beam weakens, so does Alexandria's pride. The Pharaoh's isn't just a lighthouse, it's a statement. A tower shouting into the sea. We are here, we are mighty. We have bronze mirrors and chronic back pain. You mop your brow with the sleeve of your already filthy robe. The smoke hangs thick today, heavier than usual, almost syrupy. Could be a humidity shift, could be the wood batch you pulled from the bottom stack. Or maybe it's just your imagination playing tricks. Again. That's been happening more lately. You thought you saw someone on the stairs the other day, robes, torchlight, no face. But when you called out, no one answered. You told yourself it was the heat, or the fumes, or the fact that you hadn't slept more than 4 hours in 2 days. You reach for your water flask. It's warm, and tastes vaguely like copper, but you sip it anyway, feeling the gritty residue coat your throat. You glance back at the flame, steady now, humming low, and whisper a quiet thank you to whatever god hasn't abandoned you yet. The irony. People down in the city think you're lucky. A keeper of the beacon, a guardian of civilization. You once overheard a poet call your post a noble solitude kissed by the gods. You'd like to kiss him preferably with a bucket of seawater to the face. The light burns bright for now, but so do your lungs and your hands, and that one weird rash under your tunic. Another perfect day at the top of the ancient world. By mid-afternoon, your body is officially pickled, sun-dried on one side, smoke cured on the other, and salt stung everywhere in between. You're not sure where your skin ends and the grime begins. At this point, you've accepted that you are the grime. The grime has a name. It's you. The heat inside the tower is suffocating. The fire's been roaring all day, and while the reflectors bounce light beautifully, they also bounce heat. You're baking from every angle. Sweat has pooled in places you didn't know could pool. Your tunic sticks to your back like it's made of honeyed figs, and every breath you take carries that signature cocktail of hot oil, burning wood, and ancient pigeon funk. The smoke never fully clears. Even with the vents cracked and the windows wide, the soot clings like a jealous ex. You can taste it. It settles in your hair, your lashes, even under your fingernails. And it's not just the smoke, it's the wind, too. Constant, salty, abrasive. Historians still argue whether the lighthouse was painted or left raw stone, but you're pretty sure any paint would have peeled off in a week, thanks to this breeze, which feels like it's made of powdered coral and bad intentions. The sea is gorgeous from up here, shimmering blues and green ships slicing through foam, but the view lies. The wind isn't gentle, it's vicious. It peels bark off trees, rips sails, and occasionally slams open the heavy bronze doors when you forget to bolt them. Which you did. Just now. Bang! You jump so hard you almost lose a sandal. The door slams open behind you like an angry ghost. You rush to shut it already, imagining what excuse you'll scribble in the incident report. Door possessed by minor sea deity has a nice ring to it. You bolt it tight and return to your post where the mirrors have already picked up a thin layer of salt. Of course they have. That's your next chore again. You grab a damp scrap of wool and start polishing in little angry circles, muttering as you go. You once read that the Pharaohs was considered one of the 7 wonders of the world. You're beginning to think that wonder might have referred to why anyone would agree to work here. And then there's the food. Lunch, if you can call it that, is flatbread dried fish, and some mystery fruit that started fermenting the moment the basket arrived. Your teeth crunch down on what you hope is a fig seed, and not an ancient insect. There's no kitchen up here. You cook over the beacon fire if you're desperate, and trust me, desperation arrives around day 3 without a supply runner. Still chewing, you glance toward the spiral stairs and hear a familiar, high-pitched whine. The bees are back. They love the upper tower, drawn in by the warmth, and probably the same dried fruit you're regretting right now. They've nested behind one of the reflector plates. You told your supervisor. He said consider them a divine omen. You consider them a divine health hazard. You shoo a bee away, miss, and it lands in your water flask. You sigh and flick it out. It lives. It glares. You whisper an apology. This is just how things go now. There's a crack forming in the eastern arch. You've been watching it for weeks. It's grown wider. Tiny chunks of plaster crumble off it daily. You report it. They say we'll send someone. You wait. No one comes. The lighthouse stands strong for now, but in your bones, your achy, salt-cured, underslept bones, you feel it leaning. Some days you envy the ships. They come. They go. They vanish over the horizon. You stay. You clean. You climb. You burn. But at least you're not alone. A new bird has arrived. This one's bold, smaller than Prince Tolabird, but faster. You name her Cleoberdra. She immediately poops on your polishing rag and flies into the rafters. It's a sign of respect, probably. The sun's starting to dip now, casting long golden shadows through the smoke haze. Your shift isn't over. Not even close. You have the twilight watch, then the night fire, and maybe, just maybe, 4 hours of sleep wedged between tomorrow's back-breaking loop. You lean against the warm stone wall and take a deep breath. Salty. Smoky. Slightly figgy. And here comes that wind again. Just as the sun kisses the sea, a new menace approaches people. You hear the clatter before you see them, sandals on stone, shouted orders echoing up the stairwell, and the unmistakable tone of someone who's never carried an oil jar in their life, barking about structural compliance. Great. The inspectors are here. A squad of 3, 1 Roman, 1 local Alexandrian official, and 1 temple scribe who looks like he's been trapped in a scroll room since the dawn of language. They don't knock. They don't greet. They sweep into the upper chamber like they own the place, sniff the air, like aristocratic jackals, and immediately start poking things. The Roman is the worst. His breastplate gleams. His sandals are clean. He immediately complains that the reflector alignment is off by 4 degrees and suggests you use his improved angle chart. It's a triangle carved into a stick. You resist the urge to test its aerodynamic properties via a hard toss off the tower. The temple scribe circles the flame basin and makes a face, muttering about insufficient ritual cleansing. You want to remind him that your job is keeping ships alive, not blessing the wick with lotus petals and a hymn, but instead you nod and gesture vaguely toward a jar labeled holy oil. It's just olive oil. He doesn't need to know that. Meanwhile, the Alexandrian official seems more interested in your lunch basket than the beacon. He asks if that's honeyed bread. You say no. He takes it anyway. This is what passes for oversight. Historians still argue whether lighthouse keepers had sacred civic or military status, meaning were you a priest, a civil servant, or just another disposable laborer. Judging by how these men speak to you, like you're part of the floor, you're solidly in the disposable column. They leave as quickly as they arrived, trailing smoke and condescension. They don't offer help. They don't fix the cracked mirror. They don't even close the door. Then come the random visitors. You never know who's going to appear next. A merchant from Rhodes wanting to see the view. A young scholar trying to measure the sun's angle with a stick and a string. A boy who swears he saw a god's face in the fire and wants to live in the tower permanently. You told him no. He wept, then peed on your storage crate. There's no formal process for this. The Pharaoh's is technically open to the public, or at least to those with the right robes and enough silver. You're not allowed to say no, but you are allowed to sigh dramatically while they're not looking. You get a brief moment of peace after sundown. The city below twinkles torchlight hearth fires, the faint glimmer of street vendors haggling over late-night lentils. The sounds are distant, but familiar flute music donkey brays, the occasional yell of a drunk philosopher, insisting gravity is a myth. You sit on the outer ledge legs, swinging out over the water far below, chewing the last of your fish jerky. It's too tough, probably older than the tower. You try not to think about it. A ship glides silently into the harbor guided by your beacon. It's a rare quiet moment, a reminder that the job matters, that just maybe it means something. But then the wind shifts, a voice on the stairs, another guest. This time it's a priestess from the Serapeum. She walks barefoot, robes shimmering in the firelight, eyes unblinking. She doesn't speak to you. She just stands by the flame staring at it for a full 5 minutes. You pretend to adjust a mirror. She whispers something words you don't catch, and then descends without a glance back. You exhale. The room feels colder after she leaves. You swear the flame dips slightly. The pigeons sense your unease. They settle into their crevices, blinking slowly, rustling feathers. Cleoberdra watches you from the rafters. Prince Tolabird flutters down and steals your last fig. You're too tired to care. You haul yourself upright, rubbing smoke from your eyes, and return to the flame. You have a night ahead of you. A long one. The guests may come and go, but the fire, your fire, must never sleep. The storms never give the warning. One moment the air is thick and still, the kind that sticks to your ribs and makes your robe cling like seaweed. The next bam, the gods tip over a basin of sky water and start hurling thunderbolts like they're clearing out a warehouse. You spot the first dark bruise of clouds on the horizon as you adjust a reflector. Within minutes, the sea goes from silk to fangs. Ships that once floated like feathers now buck and jolt like panicked horses. The wind climbs the tower before the rain does, slamming the shutters open with a violent crack. One slaps back and splinters against the wall, raining shards onto your work table. You shout something instinctual and unhelpful, then grab the nearest rope and wrestle the flame chamber's massive bronze door shut. It groans under the pressure, and you lean your entire body weight into it, soaked to the knees in spray that's blown through cracks that shouldn't even be cracks. The lighthouse becomes a drum, the wind beating against its flanks, the stone groaning in reply. You brace the doorway with a stack of amphorae and hope the wind doesn't learn how to use leverage. Historians still argue whether the pharaohs had built-in protections against storms. Lightning rods flood gutters, even storm walls at its base. If so, no one's told the storms. And definitely no one told this one. The rain is horizontal now. You can't tell what's seawater and what's sky. You can barely hear your own thoughts over the roar. You scramble up to the beacon room to check the fire. The wood's damp. Of course it is. A draft's pushing down through the vent like the lungs of an angry titan. The flame sputters tiny, for now, pathetic even, and you rush to feed it more oil. The splash hisses steam, whooshes up, and your face goes slick in seconds. The mirrors catch the faintest glow. It's barely enough. Another gust. This one's worse. The walls tremble. And then with a noise that's less a crack and more a divine accusation, one of the small ceiling beams gives way and drops a chunk of plaster inches from your foot. You don't scream. You just laugh. Hysterically. Because of course the ceiling's joining in. There's no protocol for this. No training. You were taught how to adjust reflectors, how to refill oil, how to shoo birds and charm officials. No one explained what to do when the tower itself feels like it's coming apart. You get the fire steady finally. Not full strength, but visible. That's enough. You peer through a water-streaked window trying to track the ships. There's one, no two, trying to steer into the harbor. You think they saw you. You hope they saw you. Lightning flashes white and cold, slicing the sky in half. For one split second, everything is illuminated. The tower, the sea, your own haggard reflection in the glass. And you swear, just for that moment, you see something else out there. A shape on the water. Too large to be a ship. Too wrong. But when the flash fades, it's gone. You chalk it up to exhaustion. Maybe wishful thinking. Maybe salt madness. Down below, something slams against the tower base driftwood. A boat. A whale in a bad mood. You'll never know. You're not going down there. You're not going anywhere until the worst of this passes. You curl up by the fire, every muscle aching, dripping from your eyebrows to your toes. You wrap your robe around your shoulders, but it's soaked and useless. Still the fire holds. That counts for something. The pigeons are silent now. Even Cleoberdra has gone to ground. Just the rain and the wind and the dull roar of the fire that refuses to go out. You sit there staring into it, lulled into a half-dream state, where your hands still move, but your mind is somewhere else. You're back in the harbor, a child staring up at the impossible shape of the lighthouse, for the first time, thinking. One day I'll work there. You really should have set higher goals. A crash of thunder shakes you from your thoughts. You sit up straighter, recheck the oil, adjust the flame, just slightly. It holds. You don't, but that's not the job. The light is steady, and no one is dead. Yet. You'll take the win. The storm passes. Eventually. They always do. But night doesn't. Night just deepens. You're still awake. You always are. The city below fades into pinpricks of gold, then vanishes entirely. The stars, when visible, wink above like they're in on some cosmic joke you're too tired to decode. But mostly it's black. Heavy, quiet, ancient black. No sound but the occasional groan of the tower and the crackle of the flame you've been feeding like a particularly demanding pet for hours. This is the part where the real weirdness sets in. You've heard stories from other keepers, those who lasted longer than a week anyway. How the night watch isn't just hard. It's strange. How you start seeing things, hearing voices, sensing people you know aren't there. And yeah, now you get it. It starts subtle. Shapes in the smoke. Faces forming and then unforming in the soot streaks on the stone. A whisper that turns out to be wind. But didn't it say your name? You tell yourself it's just fatigue. Just the fumes. Just the fact that you haven't spoken to another human being in 12 hours and your last interaction was with a pigeon. But then you notice the footprints, sooty, bare, tiny, leading toward the supply crates and stopping. You stand there, heart thumping, oil lamp shaking in your hand, trying to breathe through your mouth. Because if you inhale through your nose, you'll probably pass out from the fumes. And slowly you check the crates, one by one. There's nothing. Of course there's nothing, except a single coin. An obol old enough to be pre-Ptolemaic, sitting right where the footprints ended. You didn't put it there. You don't even know where it came from. Historians still argue whether keepers at Pharos served religious functions, guardians of the flame, emissaries of the gods, stewards of some unseen force. And honestly, you don't blame them. Because up here, when it's just you, fire, and eternity, it's hard not to believe something's watching. You pocket the coin and don't tell anyone. Time warps during the night shift. Hours stretch and contract. You check the sundial, realize bitterly that it's useless in the dark, and fall back on the only clock that never fails exhaustion. When your limbs feel like wet clay, your eyes blur, and your mind starts to loop the same thought, over and over. Don't let the fire die. Don't let the fire die. You know it must be past midnight. Some nights you hallucinate entire conversations. You've talked to Alexander the Great, to Serapis, once to your dead uncle who swore he invented raisins. You know they're not real. You know it. But they feel real. The voice has weight. The laughter echoes. You try not to let it bother you. Most of the time, the hallucinations are helpful. Encouraging, even. It's when they start giving advice on mirror angles or whispering new rituals for oil mixing that you get nervous. You force yourself to eat something, a piece of dried date, half melted in your pocket. You chew slowly like it's a royal delicacy. You tell yourself you'll nap soon. You won't. Then the talking fish arrives. You hear the splash first. You rush to the eastern window and peer down into the black. Nothing. Then you hear it again. A bubbling, warbling voice. Light's a little crooked tonight, it says. You blink. Excuse me, you whisper. Just saying the voice gurgles. You might want to tilt the third mirror left by half a finger's width. You slam the window shut and back away. You've reached that level of sleep deprivation where fish give optical advice. Wonderful. You adjust the mirror anyway. A gull screams in the distance, possibly laughing at you. You settle back beside the flame eyes, burning the coin, still in your pocket. The smoke dancing like old spirits above your head. The night is not done. Neither are you. Tomorrow you'll question all of this. But right now, the fish might have had a point. You lose track of time completely. There's just light and not light. Flickers and shadow. The whisper of the flame and your own breath, shallow, steady like waves on stone. You must have nodded off because the fire has dipped lower than it should be. You jolt awake with a start, knocking over a clay cup and sending soot-smeared water across the floor. The light, your sacred, hated, beloved burden, is dying. Panic surges through your chest like a lightning strike. Your legs wobble, but you stand. Muscle memory takes over. You stumble toward the oil jars. They're lighter than they should be. One's cracked, the other's nearly dry. Your reserves are gone. You check the supply shelf. Empty. You blink hard. No, that can't be. There should be another stash. You remember refilling it. Didn't you? Your pulse pounds in your ears. You run the mental checklist again, pacing in tight, anxious circles around the flame basin. The mirror's fine, a little dusty. The wind still howling. The oil not fine. And you're alone. You grab what you can, a cracked jar, a half wick, a frayed cloth you once used as a towel, and you do your best. You wring out every last drop angle, every mirror just so. The fire flares briefly, but the light doesn't reach the full arc it should. A ship out there could miss it. A dozen could. You stand covered in sweat, breathing so hard you feel dizzy. The flame shrinks again. A stubborn ember. A dying sun. This can't be how it ends. Historians still argue whether the pharaohs ever did go out, whether natural disaster war or just human exhaustion ever dimmed the great beacon. Maybe they'll write your name on a scroll someday, the keeper who failed. Or maybe they won't write anything at all. You grab a splintered length of wood from the broken shutter. Desperate, you feed it into the hearth. It catches just barely. You rip a strip from your own robe and add it too. The fire sputters, moans, and then miraculously it holds. It's weak, a flickering shadow of its usual self, but it burns just as the sun begins to rise. The light creeps over Alexandria's rooftops like warm honey. You stagger to the outer ledge and breathe it in. The whole city glows. You hear voices from the harbor. Bells. A donkey braying in celebration or protest. The world is waking. And down below you see something that makes your knees nearly buckle. A boat. Small. Rowed by two men. One waves a satchel in the air. Oil. They're coming. You sink against the warm stone, the fire beside you steady. Now no longer roaring, no longer angry, just alive. You made it. You actually made it. And for a few precious moments, you do nothing. No chores, no polishing, no pacing. Just sit there, wrapped in soot and sun, and the fragile relief that somehow against the odds, your light never went out. So now close your eyes and picture it, the pale sunrise spilling across the Mediterranean, casting gold across your soot-streaked face. The gulls return, the wind softens, and far below the tide kisses the shore like an apology. The fire you fed through storms and sleepless hours now glows gently beside you, humming like a lullaby. Even the pigeons settle in quiet, for once their feathers rising and falling with the rhythm of the morning. You made it through the night. The fire still burns. The city still sleeps safely because of you. And tomorrow the steps will still creak. The mirrors will still smudge. But for now, it's done. You can rest. You deserve that. Let the sea carry your worries out with the tide. Let the stone cradle your tired bones. Let the light keep watch for just a little while longer. Sweet dreams.